All right, Tom, thank you. And although the FDA considers the risks to be small, they're still requesting more data. So just about now, the CDC's vaccine advisors are meeting virtually again, this time to discuss new data on Pfizer's vaccine. As Mara Siriani explains, this meeting comes ahead of a Sunday vote with recommendations on how doctors should use the vaccine and whether some groups should receive it.
The federal government could allow the Pfizer vaccine to be shipped throughout the United States any day now, but first the drug maker has a few more hoops to jump through. Today, Pfizer is set to present additional data to the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. Last month, the drug maker said its vaccine was 95% effective. Officials also said the two-dose process had no major safety issues. Today, the CDC panel will have to make recommendations about several groups, including whether the vaccine should be used in teens ages 18 to 16. Some experts fear there's not enough data to make an informed decision about the vaccine in adolescents. The panel will also discuss whether or not the vaccine is safe for pregnant women. Next Thursday, this same panel is expected to meet again virtually to discuss the similar Moderna vaccine, which is also being reviewed for emergency use in the U.S.